Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be looking around the future city that was part of, well, April Fools for the spaceships, but instead we're going to have a look at it from the ground, air, and sea in this video. Now, two things before we start. The first thing is thank you to Father Gentlespie for making this map. Obviously, he's very much a valued member of the community. He makes a lot of custom missions, a lot of races, and a lot of custom maps, and I just want to thank him very much for the work that he does for this community. If you want to have access to this map, there'll be a link in the description for it so you can go around it yourself and maybe, invite some friends and just have a look. Maybe this might be a future map, who knows. The other thing is that over the next week I am going to be going back to England for a bit, and this is due to, unfortunately, family reasons, which are not great, but it is how it is and you have to just keep trucking. The main thing is I'll try and keep the videos going, if there's any news or anything like that, but if there is a drop in either quality or quantity of content over the next week, that is why. I think it's very important for me to be with my family right now, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. Anyway, let's get into looking at the map that we see here. So, we're in arcade. I'm going to be using the XM1, just because it's a go-kart in arcade, as you can see. And the first thing is, nothing I've found on this map yet is actually destructible. So what I mean by this is these houses here, which are, debilitated and deformed, none of them can be knocked down. They all seem to have physical models, but you can't knock them. And when it comes to the buildings on the inner part of the map over there, they're also unknockable. The trees, though, of course you can knock down the trees, and one thing that you can do in arcade, I'm not sure that you can do in realistic, is actually get up this ramp here, so you can have a look on top of it. One of the interesting things that you may have noticed while playing the events, and if you didn't, is that you can see this shield here. The shield is red in most of the parts, and it's green at the bottom. The reason for this is the red part you can't actually get through, but the green parts you can. So if you are flying really low, or if you're in a tank, you can actually get into this bottom part. So I'll show you here. So if you shoot this, you see that the shield actually stops the shot. Whereas if you shoot here, let's just annihilate this truck if we can, there you go, you actually shoot straight through the truck. But let's see, you want to hit that car over there with a HESH shell, it gets stuck on the shield. So it's kind of just a nice, interesting touch to see that we have like a force field here where you can get through some of it, but you can't get through others. Obviously the city itself is incredibly built up in one area. You can see from the map it has multi-segments, so you've got downtown, then you've got what seems to be an industrial area, then mainly housing areas, and then you've got the freeway or the motorway which goes around the place. Now, one thing after exploring this map for a long time that I thought this map would be great at would be a race map. It's got all of the key parts of it. It has some areas which are hard to get through. It has a ton of obstacles in the form of cars, rocks, and all of this stuff. And also, it has a lot of verticality to it, whether it be on these bridges or whether it be in other areas. So, for me, if this map doesn't come to the game, I have a feeling it won't, just because of the way that it's set up. It might do in a different version, but definitely not in this one. What it would be lovely to see would be some form of racing map based on this, just so we can kart around in it. And even if it's an air map, right? Because as I said before, there's a lot of verticality. You've got a bunch of different large apartment buildings or business business blocks. Then you have, of course, under all of these highways, then through the big skyscrapers. You could even put a checkpoint through that hole there if you really felt like it. There's a lot of options here, which is really cool. And even though the majority of stuff isn't destructible, there is a few things, like the cars themselves, they are destructible, some of the signs and things like that, but most stuff is non-destructible on this map. It's kind of interesting seeing all the destroyed cars and stuff. They could definitely be used on other maps to great success, and every one of them you can annihilate. If you actually get enough speed up, you can actually pop off from some of them. Now, unfortunately, this road kind of ends here, so we're going to have to take a quick detour, and we're going to land in the water, it seems. Yep. So we're just going to have to drown as gracefully as a battered duck. So the main thing I wanted to show there is that, you know, there is areas of this map where you can go upwards if you feel like it, and kind of have a look over it. So let's get into downtown, let's get into some of the smaller minutiae areas, just to kind of show you around. You can see that most of the buildings are about 5 to 10 or 20 stories high, very similar to most suburban areas that you'll find in an American or a Canadian city. The British cities that I've personally been to are not really set up like this. Like, one of the key things that I've noticed about American cities and Canadian cities is they feel incredibly gritty. You know, they're set up in a boxed way around a river, where in England, at least, because a lot of the cities are way older, there is a much more sense of built from the river and just outwards in more of a wishy-washy way. You know, not just a structured way that we see, you know, from the Americas, which makes sense. You know, it's a lot older, and as you can see, certain cars give you a little bit of a bump, which is why I think, you know, it would be fun going along these things, because you have all the obstacles, you know, the lampposts, the trees, the rocks, the cars. There's a lot of stuff here to get stuck on, and there's a lot of stuff here to have fun with. You've even got dead old telephone boxes, of all things, and then just random pieces of big concrete holding up other parts of the road. So even in this little sector, which seems to be more of a accommodation sector, let's say, or a housing sector, there is a lot of stuff going on. You know, there's a lot of large, wide streets, and also stuff like buses that you can destroy. But the main thing that is interesting about this map is the fact that every sector is surrounded by water. Now, what does this mean? Well, if you surround every sector by water and you want it to be either a competitive map or a map that comes to the game, you are inherently creating choke points, and these choke points would be, well, as you can see here, the bridges. The bridges themselves act as not really artificial choke points because they're made because of the river, but it means that in order to cross into another sector, because you've got the 4 main sectors, the 1, 2, 3, 4, you're going to have to cross these rivers. So these become incredibly high priority. We see this on Eastern Europe, where you have the river in the center. So the average player, if they are paying attention, should always be looking at the bridges, because that is where people are going to come across, and then you can work out where the enemy team is because they're generally looking at the bridges too. So places like this would be incredibly key strategically. And what is interesting about this bridge, I mean, obviously it's not supposed to be here properly because you can see the tracks and kind of going through the ground, but I've always wondered how bridges like this would work in War Thunder, you know, steep angled bridges, because stuff with high gun depression, you could sit here, hold down like this, and be able to snipe over it and pretty much just hold the way against anybody that comes in. And I thought that would be kind of an interesting thing to do. Instead of people staying back off the bridges, why not try and force them to fight on the bridges? So once again, we're in a office sector mainly, with a few houses all over the place, a few buses, a few rocks that you can annihilate. As I said, there's a few little destructible things, but nothing major, just like cars, trees and stuff, and then woohoo! And then we have the green shield. So as you can see, you can go straight through the green shield, and one of the things I do want to point out is, even though this is a heavily industrialized area, especially the downtown area with the large skyscrapers, there is still some nice grassy areas. There are a lot of bushes, trees, you know, cars and buses and all of this stuff, but the main thing is there are massive roads. Now, I've talked about this before. One of the big issues with city fighting, when you pick a let's call it a North American city, and you know, we've seen Alaska recently, which doesn't really follow this archetype, which I'm very happy with, but if you pick like a New York, or if you pick a Los Angeles, or a San Francisco, or let's say Calgary or Toronto, you get these big sweeping roads through downtown. Vancouver is another one, where you have these large, massive roads. Now, I would contest that large roads are not friendly to tanks, because instead of having a few large roads. It would be much better for tank combat if you had a lot of minor roads which you could go down and which you could flank, a la like Alaska. Alaska works pretty well in the city area if you if you disclude all the outer bits, which can make it a bit of a annoying place to fight. But the reason why it works is because you can make your own paths, whether it's artificially through buildings, or whether it's, oh, I see a guy down that street, oh, well, I can just go to the next one over there and go down there. The problem with this map, you can't do that. You're going to have to fight mano-a-mano down these streets, and that just favors specific tanks over others and gets rid of playstyles such as ones from light tanks and such as ones from things like the Orbital, things like the Char 25T. So, long sweeping roads are very realistic when it comes to these American cities, but the problem is, for tank combat, it isn't very nice. I mean, even Baghdad, right? If you go and look at the American reports from the Iraqi war, there was a really good documentary, I can't remember what it was called. It was something like History of Tanks or something along those lines, and they talked to Abrams crew commanders and basically fighting in the Iraqi areas in the Iraqi war, and the thing that they pointed out was because of the way that the streets were set up, it was very hard to actually move down them and face the tanks from the Iraqi armies, because the Iraqis would stay in garages. Like, what they would do basically is, because of their thin roads, you would get a tank which would be inferior to the Abrams. You would sit it like here, right, in this area, and you would wait for an Abrams to walk past and you would shoot it. That was the general idea of what they were trying to do, because they knew they had inferior vehicles. And this meant that it was very tense for the Abrams drivers. They did incredibly well, even though they weren't trained in this way, and they were able to flush out a lot of the Iraqi vehicles. Now, imagine trying to do that on a map like this. It's not going to work. There's too many open areas and there's no slits, so you're pretty much hoping that your MBTs on your team just go around and smash face. And it means that, there are no sneaky breaky tactics. There is nothing like that, so you just have to win the mano-a-mano fights, which is why I personally am not really a fan of these big sweeping roads when it comes to tank combat. Moving on, whoop, there's a wonderful tree in the middle of the road here, and once again, crossing the river, on another big bridge, we go to what I would class as an industrial sector, and we also have some old bus areas as well, and signposts that you can see here. But one thing why I would be incredibly surprised if this is coming to War Thunder in the near future is one of the key things that I saw in Alaska was... Why am I going forward? One of the key things I saw in Alaska is that when you shot a building, the window panels came out, the glass came out. There was a lot of destructible terrain, whereas on this battle, or on this map, there isn't any of that. And also just the general veneer of the map makes me just feel like it's just not going to come. Now, there are some really nice areas, so this would be one of them, where you can get hulled down and, fight an enemy like this, and then just reverse if you need to, using the rock as cover, or the rubble as cover. So let's say you have somebody coming down here. Oh, they've crossed. Alright, oh dear, they've got some buddies. Right, let's just do this, hug the wall, hug the wall, hug the wall. Try and angle as best you can the booty, and then when you're ready, you can just do this and run away. It is something you can do. And then we're in a huge open area. So this, I think, would be a central park of the city, and there is no way you want to be fighting here. Holy hell, this is ULQ territory. This is... Oh, I'm just going to sit on the other side and wait for you to walk across. This, to me, would be absolute hell to be able to fight from. God damn. But yeah, it is just something to think about. And also there's a wonderful little point here. So, yeah, this area is a little bit more officey and residential once again. Downtown is obviously incredibly built up. This place is a little bit more green, there's a little bit more of the grassy areas. No baseball parks. It would have been nice to have a baseball park, but there is some really nice paths, and obviously, there's a nice little area here where the general locals, before the alien attack, could, come in. Then, of course, we have a skip. which we can't destroy, but we do have a we do have a hippie van, and the hippie van, well, meets an XM1. Screw those things. But anyway, let's move on. The general, as I said, veneer is very nice in this area. You know, you have a lot of grass, you have a lot of green going on, you have a lot of stuff which makes the area look really nice, really different compared to the rest. And you can see how big the map is, you know. We've traveled a hell of a long way, and we are nowhere near the end of this map. You know, there's a ton of places to actually go around on this map. There is a ton of areas which you could easily fight around, which is why, if this map ever comes, I could definitely see it being being cut into some small areas. So instead of fighting over, you know, these 4 quadrants, instead maybe you fight over this quadrant here, or you fight over the center quadrant, and then you have the, you know, the cap points either side near bridges. The problem with this, of course, is spawn camping bridges is incredibly easy to do, so you do have to worry about that idea. See, if you hit the cars right, you will go a little bit flippy-dippy, but that's alright. You know, it's not the end of the world. And then you've got what seems to be some kind of port area over here. God damn it. You can see there's some kind of port area over here with like no port on it, and then you have what seem to be some form of silos on top of the buildings, which I don't think you can destroy. No, you can't. And then, of course, police cars and all of these wonderful things. But the main thing is that this is a really nice looking map. It is something different, and just for a single April Fool's event, there is no way this was all just designed just for one 5-day event. There must be something else going on here, kind of like with the Middle East. You know how we had the Middle East map, and that map eventually came to the game a few years later? I can definitely see this one coming to the game as a tank battle map later on in some form, whether it's you know, a smaller version of the map or maybe a larger version for some form of enduring confrontation. So something I want to talk about from the air is an idea of a game mode which I think could work pretty well. So you know how you can see here that from the air there are 4 distinct areas of the city. Right, you've got the top area where the shield is, where it's fully, you know, built up. You've got this area with what seems to be a port. You've got that area with what seems to be residential, and then a nice little more green area with more residential stuff. What if we got some form of PlanetSide 2 idea? Now, let me explain. So the way that PlanetSide 2 works is that you have a variety of different maps. You have, I believe, 3 factions, maybe more, maybe less, but let's just say 3 for now. And these 3 factions fight over a single map, and they fight over quadrants in said map. Well, here you're looking at 4 separate quadrants of a map to be able to fight over. You've got the center section, which would be the contested one, the home sections over here and here, and then you have the top section here. Now you could do this in a large-scale enduring confrontation battle where each area is fought over very hard and is able to, you know, be captured depending on the amount of tanks which is in each area. And the idea is it would be an ever-moving battlefield from that point, which I think would work really well, if I was quite honest. And I hope that this map could be used for something like this. Now I'm going to show you something about the red. So you know how we talked about before, you can't hit through it, and there is, you know, confirmation with the Tiny Tims that you can't shoot through the red. But when it comes to the green at the bottom, well, you can even fly through it. So I'm going to try it and you know, fail spectacularly. There's also a little island out here with a beached boat, which is always nice to see. And by the way, I'm flying the F7F here. This is the premium version, the F3. I really like it, one of my favourite premiums in the game, always good for grinding. So, I think, personally, that there is a lot of areas here that could be used great in some form of PlanetSide-esque idea. Right, so we can go through there. And also, something I may have not pointed out, is if you look at the top of this skyscraper, I thought it was just a nice little touch, you can actually see, you know, the the Earth Thunder sign. So there it is. I just thought, isn't that a lovely little thing? You know, we'll fly by it just to show it off. Also, this map is huge, and it's definitely built for what I would class as an enduring confrontation battle, because it has the capability of having ground forces, air forces, and naval forces. And with a lot of people talking about how they want RBEC, even though when, you know, the events are actually on, people normally don't play them, I've got a feeling that we're going to see some type of events, whether it be in the World War mode, which could fit really well on this map, or some kind of combined arms idea. War Thunder from the outset has said that one of their key concepts is combined arms, and that's why for me, when destroyers and light cruisers were added, I was very much peeved, because it goes away from this idea. But hopefully with maps like this, we can find a nice balance between the ideas of larger ships and planes. Oof. So you can see, you can fly through it if you want, and I am on arcade, remember, so it might be a little bit harder on realistic. But yeah, you can see that from the skies, this map is definitely, or can definitely be designed to be and work well as a map which works on combined battles. One of the things, let's just say you take away the shield, right, because if we're trying to create a realistic map, you wouldn't have the shield. So, with the shield gone, if you're fighting in the sector and you are a helicopter or a plane coming in, a lot of your views are very much obstructed because of the higher buildings. Even in a sector like this, you know, depending on where you're approaching from, half of your views are going to be annihilated and you're not going to be able to see them against the tanks coming in. This means that the tanks will get more cover. This means that the ground forces could be balanced with planes and helicopters. One of the issues we've always had when it comes to ground forces is the idea that planes are always going to have, you know, the advantage over ground combats, and this is just a fact of history. So this way is one of the ways of rebalancing that fact, where you can see I can't shoot down the street because the buildings are in the way. So that is one way you do it. You make maps like Alaska, you make maps like this, where depending on your angle of approach, unless the person is coming from straight above, which is, you know, one of the toughest angles to attack from, and, you know, shows a lot of skill, so if they do kill you, you know, well done to them. It means that you can escape from helicopters and escape from aircraft. Like if I'm hitting somebody here and I'm firing in some tiny tims, it's like, okay, fair enough, he got me. But in that position, I'm the most vulnerable to AA, I'm the most vulnerable to other aircraft, I'm the most vulnerable to stuff like helicopters and everything like that. So yeah, that's something to think about. The map overall is absolutely huge, and to be honest, I will be exploring it more and more. I'm not sure which map it is actually based on. If I was going to hazard a guess, I would probably say Korsun or Mozdok, but please don't take my word for it. That really is a guess. It could also be Afghanistan. It really could be anything, but that is just an idea. Now let's have a look at the naval portion of it, because I think Gentlespie's actually done a really good job here of being able to put these spawns where at least I believe, you know, they're going to be. You know, you have the ground forces around here, you have the air forces on either side, and then you have, obviously, you know, some naval around here. Then you've got this point just to, you know, see what's going on. So, as you can see from the naval point of view, you spawn quite far away from the city, and what is key, and one of the problems that I've said on maps like Normandy or generic maps that we have when it comes to ground forces, is I'm so worried that a naval bombardment will just come in and annihilate the ground forces on the ground. You know, it doesn't take long, especially now that we're getting larger and larger and larger ships, and it seems like, you know, the trend is not going away, that we're just going to have a situation where if you ever do put these larger ships on naval maps with ground forces, they're just going to go to pound town on the enemy ground forces. But on a map like this, where there's a ton of cover, there's a ton of stuff going on for, you know, the ground forces, there's no way a ship in any sense could get decent shots into any of this. So I think this is a way, as I said, you can see how this map is set up for combined forces. It gets rid, or tries to get rid, of some of the issues that plagues ground forces when it comes to being inputted with the other types of the game. So, you know, the naval and the air components. And I think it's one of the closest maps that we've seen so far, which could strike a balance between those three sectors that we always have issues with. So yeah, I'm actually really pleased with this map from that point of view. And as I said before, it's a stunning map. I really hope that if it isn't ever used in an official capacity by Gaijin, this map has to be used for community events. You know, it has to. Somebody has to make a race on it. It feels perfect for racing, especially in ground vehicles and air vehicles, because of all, as I said, the verticality of stuff like this. You know, you have to go under here, you have to go over there, you have to go under there. You know, there's a lot of stuff. Even naval races, because remember, there are rivers which go through all of these areas. So as a boat, as a PT boat, you can actually get within the city and start attacking people, which is, well, kind of fun, actually. But the main thing is, there's a lot of stuff going on this map. There's a lot of interesting ideas, and it would be nice to see it not go to waste. And I've got a feeling, you know, it won't go to waste. I'd be incredibly surprised if it went to waste. But the main thing is, even if it does go to waste, and we don't see it for a long time, it's still in the files, it can still be tampered with. Let's try and make some community events out of this. Let's make an interesting race. Let's make something to just go around it and have a bit of fun. Maybe work out where would be the best points for domination zones. Maybe, as I said, some form of planet-side sector. As a community, let's try and work out how to make this map work. I've seen a lot of people want, or at least talk about wanting, ground forces for enduring confrontation. This is the perfect map to start you on. Try and make a plan on this map and make it work. And then we'll see what we can do. Let's see what we can create, let's get the noggins jogging, and let's enjoy ourselves. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed going around this map as much as I have, and well, if you don't see me for about a week, you know why, and if I don't respond to comments, I apologise. If I'm not available on the Discord, I also apologise. Things will keep on ticking with the team over there, but for me, it's the European Canadian, signing out. I'd like to thank B. Young, Blackie, Dyslexic Child, Moxie, Olo Brolo, Martinez, and Super Cacti for supporting me on Patreon.